I'm going to turn the time over to Maurice now for his remarks, and he would be able to answer your question. Maurice.
All right, thank you, everyone. Before I get started with my remarks, I really want to thank World Beyond War for providing us with a platform to share this story with you. I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders of Friends of the Congo, and we really have two overarching aims. One is to raise global consciousness about what's transpiring in the Congo, and the other is to provide support to local institutions inside the country. And whenever we get an opportunity or we're invited in to raise consciousness about what's transpiring, we're truly humbled and grateful for that opportunity. So just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this story with you. The situation in the Congo, as the film states, it's not just a Congolese issue. It's not just an African issue, but it's a global issue. And we argue that the Congo has been caught in the midst of a geostrategic battle. In fact, that was the crucible in which the modern nation was born, because at the Berlin Conference in 1884-1885, 14 European nations and the United States gathered to determine the fate of an entire continent. In fact, that Berlin Conference was also called the Congo Conference, and the Congo was seen as a great prize. And because European powers didn't want to go to war against each other for that great prize, they gave it to King Leopold II as his own personal property. And the United States was the first government to recognize the ownership of the Congo under King Leopold II. In fact, one of the main lobbyists was a gentleman by the name of Harry Sanford. And some of you may be familiar with that name because there is a city or a town in Florida that was named after him, Sanford, Florida, where the modern-day Black Lives Matter movement got its origin. It's there in Sanford, Florida, where you had Trayvon Martin that was assassinated or murdered by George Zimmerman. So the U.S., from the very beginning, was implicated in the Congo story under the ownership of King Leopold II of Belgium. And U.S. engagement has been consistent throughout the years. When Congo was finally turned over, not to the Congolese people in 1908, but to the Belgian state, and ruled as a colonial outpost, the United States benefited tremendously from Congo being colonized by the Belgians, especially during World War II, when, during the Manhattan Project, they had to find the uranium for their atomic weapons. And it was uranium that was extracted from the Congo under the Belgians that fueled the atomic weapons that were dropped on Japan in World War II. So if you look at the Congo itself, its trajectory in the last 125 years, it's eerie how the technology that's been developed in the West has drawn upon the resources that you found in the Congo. And the U.S. has been at the forefront of that. Now, the Congolese finally fought and got their independence in 1960 with one of their independence heroes, Patrice Emery Lumumba, being at the forefront. And Lumumba, recognizing the position of his country in terms of its strategic location on the African continent, in terms of its spectacular wealth, said we finally want to use this wealth for the benefit of Congolese in particular and Africans in general. In fact, he had an agreement with Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, where Congo would serve as the capital of Nkrumah's Pan-African project, the United States of Africa, and serve as the economic engine for the industrialization of the African continent. And Nkrumah lays this out in a book called The Challenge of Congo. However, with Lumumba taking such a strong stance as a nationalist and a Pan-Africanist, this sent shudders through Western capitals. And within a matter of weeks, Lumumba was deposed by the CIA. And the CIA chief of station, Larry Devlin, laid out in a book of that same name, Chief of Station Congo. It's really a playbook as to how he overthrew, he led the CIA in overthrowing Patrice Lumumba, who was subsequently assassinated. And Devlin said in his book, he said, we had to overthrow Lumumba, because if we didn't overthrow Lumumba, not only would we have lost Congo, but we would have lost all of Africa. Now, when we talk about overthrow of democratically elected government and assassinations, in fact, that enterprise by Larry Devlin was the first post-independence country that the United States intervened in on the African continent. But not only was it the first, it was the largest covert action on the part of the United States at that time. The State Department just released a couple of years ago the classified documents from that period. And in those documents, they laid out how it is that this was the largest investment on the part of the United States in terms of covert action in the world to date. So it was a priority placed on replacing Lumumba. And not only did they replace Lumumba, but they had a say in who would lead the country and every major decision in that country for the next decade. So even though Congo had its independence, it was not truly independent. And not only did the United States overthrow Lumumba, but they also imposed a dictatorship on the Congolese people for another 3 decades. So it wasn't just a man that they assassinated. They wiped out an entire leadership and democratic process, right? Because Lumumba's campaign, the campaign that he ran, was a non-ethnic, right, national campaign. And the Congolese people say, you are the one we want to lead us. So that was entirely wiped out by the United States. However, when we talk about the role the United States has played in destroying democratic aspirations of people around the globe, we do not often include Congo in this discussion because Congo fits right in with Mossadegh in Iran, or Arbenz in Guatemala, or Allende in Chile. This is the same playbook. So the framework is set. The empire is clear about how it removes democratic leaders that do not serve the interests of the empire. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us who are fighting and pushing back against this to tell the whole story. And that's why I'm so thankful that we're talking about the Congo story in this discussion as it relates to peace and war. Because we've been told, the United Nations says it's the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. Therefore, every peace group, every anti-war group should have Congo on their lips. If we're talking about the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II, and if we know that at the root of it, the weakness of the Congolese state that allows that many people to perish is based on a U.S. foreign policy that overthrew a democratically elected leader, imposed a dictatorship for 3 decades, and then when you had democratic forces ready, nonviolent pro-democracy forces ready to remove that dictatorship in the early 1990s, instead of the greatest democracy in the world backing those pro-democratic forces, they backed an invasion, a war by Congo's allies, Rwanda and Uganda in particular. So, centering the Congo in their discussion around peace and stability and democracy is incumbent upon us, those of us who are fighting for peace, those of us who are fighting for justice. Because the effects of those policies last right through to this day. And they have been doubled down on. When the Clinton administration, Clinton made his trip to Africa in 1998. Out of that trip, he developed what they call the Entebbe Principles, named after Entebbe, Uganda. And the Entebbe Principles elucidated certain elements, right? Out of the Entebbe Principles came what Madeleine Albright, who was then Secretary of State, and Susan Rice, who was then Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, called the Renaissance leaders of Africa, a new breed of African leaders. These are the leaders that the United States would put its stamp on, its imprimatur, to say to the world, these leaders represent the future of the African continent. Now, these leaders had certain characteristics among them. You know, some of these leaders we're talking about, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, Paul Kagame of Rwanda, Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia. These are some of the leaders. They had certain characteristics among them, especially Kagame and Museveni. One, they got to power through the barrel of a gun. Right? Two, they invaded another African country. Three, they had the blood of millions of Africans on their hand. Four, they form the beachhead of the neoliberal policies in the heart of Africa. And they're authoritarian figures. We say they are reprobate sociopaths. And however, the United States will do everything to provide cover for them. The crimes that they commit locally, inside the Congo or the region, are cleansed on the international level by the United States. That they invite them here to universities and they speak and they're presented as strong leaders and models. At the United Nations, when they attempt to hold them accountable, the U.S. run political or diplomatic interference. Now, mind you, some other international bodies have held them accountable. Like the International Court of Justice, for example, in 2005 said that Congo is entitled to billions of dollars in reparations because of the pilfering and the war crimes that were committed in the Congo by Uganda. Rwanda would have been held to the same, held accountable as well, but they're not party to the International Court of Justice. You'll find that Rwanda are not party to too many international treaties that has to deal with holding folks accountable. However, the Spanish courts honor the principle of universal jurisdiction, the same principle that they went after Pinochet the same principle that went after Pinochet with. They also went after Rwanda, and they put an arrest warrant out on some 40 Rwandan top officials. They couldn't do the same for Kagame because he's the head of state. So we have international bodies that the United States do not necessarily have a strong influence in that attempts to hold them accountable. So we here in the United States have a responsibility for pressuring our government, right, to hold its allies accountable by not arming them, by not financing them, by not training them. Now, it did get to a point in 2012 where it was just too much, where the Rwandan leader Paul Kagame was sponsoring militia groups inside the Congo that was recruiting child soldiers, displacing millions of people, and committing mass atrocities. And the U.S. finally withheld military aid, $200,000. Yeah? So I know you laugh at it, but there is a lesson in it. There's a lesson in it. Remember, we're in an empire. The U.S. moves, and then other nations move. So even though $200,000 was a paltry sum, what it did was it sent a signal to other nations. So Great Britain withheld millions. Germany withheld millions. The Netherlands and Sweden. So even with that small amount that was withheld, we had other nations that stepped in and withheld millions of dollars from the Rwandan government. And that played a critical role in holding that government accountable to the point where it had to cease its support of the militia groups inside of the Congo, and people were able to go back to their land where they had been displaced from. So that goes to show that the international community, particularly the United States, can have an impact on what transpires in the region for good, even if it's just a paltry sum. So where are we today with the situation in the Congo? The conflict is still ongoing. In fact, this October will be the 20th anniversary of the invasion of the Congo in 1996. And the conflict is still ongoing. However, the Congolese people are resisting. There are really two structural challenges that the country faces. One, of course, that we've laid out in the film is external interference, especially from its neighbors that destabilize the country. And the second is an authoritarian leadership that's in place, the president. And his name is Joseph Kabila, and the Kabila regime. And that regime has been supported from day one by the United States. Joseph Kabila took over his father when he was assassinated. His father was assassinated in 2001. Joseph Kabila was only 29 years old. He was one of the first presidents in the world to visit George Bush in the White House. 29-year-old, no history in politics, takes over from his father right to the White House. So the U.S. backed him. In 2006, they had an election. They went through a peace process, had elections, and there's a report that was published by the International Crisis Group called Consolidating the Peace. And they laid out how the United States played a role in assuring that Joseph Kabila would be elected to office in 2006. And I'm going to repeat that study because it's it's a seminal study in showing U.S. role behind the scenes in assuring that the person that they would like to see become a leader of a country actually does so. And it's called Congo Consolidating the Peace, published by the International Crisis Group. So the Constitution says that you can you can serve office for two 5-year terms. So again, in 2011, there were elections that were held. Massive fraud. Joseph Kabila cheated. You couldn't even tell the results, and the U.S. backed those results again and supported him. And today, in 2016, he's supposed to leave office. And the U.S. is finally, after the damage has been done, the U.S. is finally saying, well, he's got to leave office. But the damage is already done. He's accumulated power, and now it's a very difficult task for the Congolese people to assure that he leaves office per the Constitution. And that's what's transpiring currently, where the people are organizing, particularly the youth, to remove Joseph Kabila from office, calling on him to respect the Constitution, which says he must step down on this December 19th of this year. And in two major uprisings, one in January 2015 and one just this week in September 19th and 20th this year, Kabila unleashes security forces, killing dozens, firing live bullets, killing dozens of youth protesters. So the youth are organizing. They're willing to put their lives on the line so that they can get control of their country, so that they can have peace, so that they can have democracy, so that they can have justice, and so that they can live in dignity. And this movement is called the Telema movement. For those of you who are online or those of you on social media, you use the hashtag Telema. The website is telema.org. And the Congolese people are calling on us to join them. Join them in their fight for human dignity. Join them in their fight for justice. And they're saying that because Congo is giving so much to the world, because we all benefited. Each and every one of us has a cell phone. There's coltan that comes from the Congo, fuels our cell phones, fuels our video games. We all benefit from the resources. We're active on social media in organizing. At the very least, we can acknowledge what's happening in the Congo. We can lift up the Congo. We can support those youth who are fighting to bring about a change in the heart of Africa. And that's the appeal that I'm here to make to you today, to lift up the Congo, support the fight of the Congolese people, support the fight for justice. Dr. King said it best. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I call on you to join this fight for justice, join this fight for peace, join this fight for human dignity in the heart of Africa. Thank you.